Hi everyone, welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. My name is Mahika, and this podcast is about sharing the inspiring stories of women from all walks of life and celebrating their success, whilst delving into the mindset behind their journeys, their inspiration, and their ideas. Today, we're joined by Summaya Mughal, an award-winning TV and radio presenter for the BBC, a journalist, an actress, a podcast host of Brown Girl Can't Swim, and recently a TEDx speaker. Summaya undertook the challenge of learning to swim, mentored by two Olympians, Rebecca Adlington and Alice Deering, during a 5-part series in a bid to compete swimming 500 meters in open water in just 8 weeks. Her journey has been documented on the BBC podcast, winning Sports Journalist Association winner Podcast of the Year this year. And today, we're going to talk to Summaya about learning to swim and learning to overcome your fears and just really nurture your gifts as an individual. I'm really excited for this episode and I hope you enjoy it. Summaya, welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. Before we start talking about swimming and your podcast, I want to talk a little bit about you, your culture, and identity as they're key themes in your podcast. Growing up as South Asian in Britain, aside from not being able to swim, what else did you feel shame and embarrassment for? In my experience, I moved from India when I was young and I found assimilating difficult, navigating my identity both as British Asian, in the way that I looked, in the way that I smelled and I sounded. What was your journey with navigating your identity growing up as Pakistani in Britain?
Well, firstly, what an incredible podcast idea, and credit to you, Mahika. What an absolute joy to be a part of this. Honestly, it's brilliant, and hats off to you for creating such a beautiful platform. I think in relation to the challenges that I faced in terms of my identity, the very idea that I wanted to be a broadcaster, the very idea that I love to act, the very idea that I'm a musician and wanted to do something that's typically more creative than academic is something that I have struggled with a lot. It's the focus of my TEDx, which is not yet released, but the idea around it is that we all have a gift to give to the world. And depending on our circumstances, how we were brought up, our communities, all of our external influences, we might see that gift as what it is, right? A real gift that should be cherished and has value. Or you might see your gift as something that's inadequate and lesser than and not respected because it might not be conventional. And for me as a child, the fact that I always knew that my gift was being able to perform in some capacity and that's what I wanted to do was something that I felt deep shame about. It was something that wasn't the mainstream. Growing up, I didn't see any and still don't see any British, Pakistani, Muslim women on the TV doing what I wanted to do. And so the biggest challenge for me has been accepting myself for what I'm good at and who I am, and embracing that with open arms and moving away and undoing all of the narratives around shame and inadequacy, and actually sitting here on this podcast today saying, my gift is this, I'm proud of it, it's a good thing. And it's not only something that enriches my soul, but is also something that has the power to enrich humanity. Which is the reason I do what I do now. It's important for me to be visual and to be present and people to see people like me, for the younger versions of Summaya. However, that journey of accepting who I am has been hard, and that's been largely due to my background, you know. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so incredible. And that definitely resonates with my experience as well. And I'm sure that our audience will also feel that way. Can you please give us some advice on how you overcame that shame and how you started to feel comfortable sharing your journey with the public and as a public figure, kind of documenting that? Because it's one thing to kind of feel shame very privately and kind of overcome that in your personal life, but then to go and broadcast that and speak about your struggles is another level of courage. And can you please talk us through that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not been an easy journey, and I actually really want to give a lot of credit to my dad. So my dad was born in Pakistan. He's a doctor, quite a conservative, traditional upbringing. And he was probably, when I was a child, also the person that perhaps didn't really see the value in being an actor, right? Or journalism. Maybe journalism a little less so. I think that he probably saw some value in journalism. but it's not a conventional career. And so when I graduated from university, I had an offer to work at Deloitte, which is the largest accounting firm in the world. I had an offer to work with HSBC. I had multiple jobs starting on over 30 grand in London, and I rejected all of them and moved back to Nottingham. I moved in with my dad, and I was working in a shirt shop. And I remember the conversation with him when I turned around and said, I've got my degree now, but I don't want to pursue a more conventional route. I want to do something different. I love to act. I went to an amazing drama school as a child called the Television Workshop. And I remember the look on his face. And I think a part of him was a bit relieved because he was like, she's got her degree now. It's going to be okay. And she can clearly get a job because she's been offered multiple. But, he didn't really comment on the other thing that I wanted to do. And then less than a year later, I won a competition to present a new evening show on BBC Radio Nottingham. And I all of a sudden was a presenter for the BBC. And I think in answer to your question, and the reason I'm sort of giving you the context around it, is if I think about my dad then, which was 5 years ago this year, when just before I joined the BBC, to where I am now, one of the ways in which I've overcome my shame is bringing him on the journey with me. I think you have a choice, and I've done both. You either hide who you are and live a bit of a double life. You don't tell your parents or your family or your community or whoever it is you feel is going to judge you, what you really enjoy doing, how you really like to dress, all that type of thing, your boyfriends. I've done it all. So you either have a double life or you decide to do the scarier thing, which is to say, no, this is who I am in my full authentic form. These are the clothes that I like to wear. This is how I like to speak. This is what my perspective is on religion. This is the boyfriend that's been a secret for however long. And whether it's telling my dad about relationships or telling him that actually I want to act, or telling him that there's nothing wrong in the career that I want to pursue, it's not been easy. However, those conversations have probably contributed to the most in terms of me overcoming my shame. And I want to caveat that it's not my dad that has made me feel embarrassed or shameful about what I'm good at. I think it's the wider feelings from the community. Just because the career that I'm deciding to pursue isn't something that is seen as esteemed as, being a doctor or a lawyer, an accountant and an engineer, all incredibly brilliant careers, but not careers that I'm interested in, or, something that I'm naturally good at. I think that's the other thing, So in terms of me overcoming my shame, in answer to your question, it's come with a lot of bravery, a lot of having to have difficult conversations with the people that perhaps I feel the most shame from, if you like, not the whole community, because you have to also filter, like, who do you want to talk to? Like, I don't have to tell an auntie down the street, what I really want to do with my life, but I do have to tell my parents because they're the people that have such a big influence on my life. I think the other thing I would say, and the thing that has surprised me on the journey, is I perhaps had a lot of shame and fear because of not really maybe understanding what the response would be like if I was going to do something a little bit different. So, for example, if we take Brown Girl Can't Swim, this podcast that I created, I felt like I'm really scared about telling this story. I'm going to be really public with it. I'm going to be on the BBC, on TV, learning to swim. I don't know how my community are going to react to that. I'm speaking out about the fact this is something that loads of us don't do. I don't want to picture the community in a really bad light, but the statistics show that this isn't something that we do a lot, and we should do it because it's a life skill. And I was really scared about how the community might react. Honestly, I couldn't have been more wrong. That community that I was so fearful of are actually now my biggest champions. And of all of the interviews that I've done about Brown Girl Can't Swim, I did one on Radio Ramadan, which is a grassroots local radio station that pops up over the month of Ramadan for 30 days in Leicester. And it's proper at the heart of the community. And I was nervous about how they would respond to my challenge and what I'd done with the BBC. And yet, they were just incredible. I had so many sisters, aunties, uncles texting saying, Summaya, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the work. And never in a million years at the beginning of my career did I think that this would be something that my community wouldn't just accept, but embrace with open arms and say, this is a good thing. And of course, naturally, that's helped me overcome my shame. So a very long-winded answer, but I would say communication, bravery. It's always better to be honest, even though I know that it can be incredibly difficult. And it might not be as bad as you think.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we start talking about Brown Girl Can't Swim, because that is so exciting and I have so many things I want to talk to you about, I just briefly want to ask you about how your career as an actress, influenced your work later in life as a podcast host, a TV and radio presenter, because how did that help your confidence and give you the strong foundation to become a public figure, like later in your career?
Yeah, okay. So I was really lucky that I was born in Nottingham and I trained at a BAFTA award-winning drama school called the Television Workshop. And when I say trained, I mean it was like drama club, right? That I went to twice a week. And it just so happened to have a really strong connections with ITV and the BBC. So we get lots of auditions as kids for Tracy Beaker and Slumdog Millionaire. I auditioned for Slumdog Millionaire. I auditioned for Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging. Obviously, I didn't take that part because I had to kiss a boy, so I had to reject that. It was awful. And I was in the room with Gurinder Chuddah, who's the director of Bend It Like Beckham. And I had to tell her, oh, there's no way I can actually do this part. And she was like, it's because there's a kiss, isn't there? And I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry, you know. So I definitely think being exposed to learning about scripts and learning scripts and learning words off by heart, being on the stage and having to perform, whether that's Shakespeare or whether that's a duologue or a monologue, and the bravery that takes, the commitment it takes to decide to, learn your lines, for example, all that kind of stuff has definitely helped me as a podcaster and also as a radio presenter. I think that if you're exposed to literature as a child, especially in a theatre sort of format, you learn words that you perhaps never would have come across before. You learn how to be eloquent, you learn diction, all of these things that I totally, didn't even realize that I was getting twice a week every time I was going to the television workshop and I was training. And even though I'm not acting full time, I recently did a Shakespeare play. And it was so good because I hadn't acted in ages and I got the lead part and I was like, oh my God. And I realized then that the reason why I'm a good actor and I could do Shakespeare and actually understand what I was talking about and try and communicate something that just sounds really weird to an audience and for them to understand it was because I do radio. My job every day is to try and explain complicated news stories and break them down and say, right, this is basically what you need to know, right? But in the opposite way, all of my experience of speaking clearly, understanding meaning, diction, learning lines, even intonation. When you're on the radio, you've got radio scripts that are so boring sometimes, but my experience with acting was taking a script and absolutely bringing it to life. And that's all helped. All of that's helped. So I think the television workshop set an incredibly strong foundation that 20 years on, I'm so grateful for. In terms of me being a podcaster and a radio presenter and even on telly. I'm not scared to be on telly. I can literally do telly with my eyes closed because I trained in stage and screen. It's probably what I enjoy most. I don't do so much of it as much of it as I would like, and hopefully that's going to change soon and I'll do more television. But I think it just gave me confidence from a really, really young age and really valuable skills, whether I decided to be a broadcaster or be an accountant or be a doctor. All of those skills are transferable to whatever industry you decide that you want to go down.
That's so amazing. What I find really interesting with acting, because I have a brief acting background as well, is you're often put in a place where you play a character and you kind of sit there and you think about a character and you kind of step out of yourself and navigate the plot or the play or the film in that role. Do you feel like that is a theme in your work as a presenter on TV and radio? Or do you think Summaya on the radio and on the TV is the same as Summaya in your day-to-day life?
I think there's two things here with the putting yourself in the position of somebody else, which is what you do when you act. I think in relation to if I'm interviewing somebody else, and I'll talk to you about that, as me as a broadcaster. But I think there's two benefits to it. I think one, every single day when whoever I'm interviewing, my job is to try and empathize with their situation. And they might be someone that is, I literally cannot empathize with your situation. Do you know what I mean? You could be like a 7'9" bloke from Austria, the complete opposite to me. I'm a 5' Pakistani girl from Nottingham. Do you know what I mean? And he might have had some crazy experience doing like 7 Ironmans or something. I only just learned to swim about 5 minutes ago. So I have to find a way, like, how can I like relate to this person? And how can I empathize with their experience? And what are the emotions that they perhaps felt through the journey that maybe I can relate to because I had a similar experience with that similar sort of emotion? So I think the acting thing helps me a lot when it comes to empathizing with my contributors, therefore getting the best questions out of them, getting the best story out of them, and making it sound as brilliant as possible on the radio. I think in terms of my broadcasting, I was told early on, sorry, in my career, that the best presenters are the ones that don't act. If you're presenting, then it I think, especially in radio and podcasting, radio's got a degree of intimacy to it. The best radio presenters are the ones that feel like your mates, right? They feel like your best friends. They're people that you can relate to. They talk the way you talk. They, observe things that you're also like, oh my God, yeah, I totally relate to what how you describe this or that. And so if it feels like someone's acting at you or presenting at you, it's just like, who is this person? You know what I mean? So I try to be as much as myself as possible when I'm on the radio. But the other thing that I would say is it totally depends on the radio show. So if I'm doing a news show about lockdown, coming out of lockdown, which I've had to do, or I'm presenting on the breakfast show the morning after the Queen died, which I also had to do, that's going to be more of a journalist, Summaya, in comparison to me presenting an evening show on BBC Radio Nottingham, playing Drake, doing moral dilemmas, and just like having a great time. Do you know what I mean? So I guess in terms of me and how much I act, I try to be as authentic to myself as possible, but sometimes it depends on the requirements of the show that you're presenting.
I think that's really interesting, and it's a testament to your versatility. I don't know how to say the word, as a public figure and a presenter, and that you cater your kind of role to each kind of circumstance, and that's so interesting. Okay, let's talk about your podcast, Brown Girl Can't Swim. So you've said in previous interviews that you've had a few swimming lessons as a child, but you never fully learned. What made you take the decision to finally make a change and learn? Was there a specific event that cemented the fact that you needed to make a change and finally learn how to swim?
Yes. I was on the breakfast show on BBC Radio Leicester, and we just launched a brand new show, and it was ahead of the Tokyo Olympics prior COVID. And Leicester, BBC Radio Leicester covers Leicestershire and Loughborough as well. And Loughborough is like the sporting capital of the world, right? So we'd always get loads of Olympians on. Anthony Joshua trains in Loughborough, loads of Olympians train in Loughborough. And one of them was Alice Deering, who is the first female black swimmer for Team GB to compete in an Olympic Games. And I was interviewing her about her sort of run up to Tokyo and that sort of thing. And she was also talking about the challenges the Black community might face when swimming. And this was something that I had never heard of in my life. My best friends are both Jamaican. So I also felt really surprised at the fact that this was something that I didn't know, because they are literally, my oldest friends in the world. I've known them for over 2 decades. So part of me was kind of like, wow, I had absolutely no idea that, individuals from the Black community may have to take into account the swim cap that they wear because they need to protect their hair, or there's myths around bone density and research into that, and all of these different factors. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is a girl that's not far off my age, that has managed to, make the Team GB Olympic team. That's fantastic. But actually, away from that, beyond that, she is raising a conversation in her community and trying to do something about it. And I sat there, I thought, this is brilliant. Who's doing this in my community? Because I know for sure there's definitely challenges, barriers, that sort of thing in the South Asian community. And as a Pakistani Muslim woman, I knew that there definitely would have been, and reasons why we may not swim or feel inclined to, learn to swim. And I did a bit of research, and I just couldn't find the equivalent Alice. I couldn't find, an Olympian that was competing for Team GB that was brown. I couldn't find the equivalent of the Black Swimming Association, and they do also cater for the Asian community. But with it being called the Black Swimming Association, I didn't know that it was something that they kind of try to incorporate the Asian community. And I felt like, well, there needs to be something for us. And it's not to say that there aren't South Asians working in the space, but I literally could not find anyone, at least not anyone Muslim either. And that was important. I think the Sikh community have started raising the conversation a little bit, but I'm not Sikh. And that's important because, as you'll know, if you are Sikh you are Muslim or you're within the South Asian community, we might look similar, but our faiths are different, and we will take different things into account when it comes to swimming, for example. So in Islam, modesty is important, and maybe one of the biggest reasons as to why Muslim women especially may feel like they can't go swimming, because if you think about swimming, you hardly wear anything, right? You can wear more covered up clothing. That is a possibility. However, the Sikh community, though, women may still want to dress a little bit more covered up. Men may want to dress a little bit covered up. It's not in the religion in the same way as it is in Islam. And so I decided, okay, well, I can't swim. I can't see other people talking about this, but I suspect I'm not the only brown girl in the world that can't swim. So I'm going to do something about it. And that's how it came about.
That's, again, so powerful. Thank you for being that role model for members of your community. I think this links seamlessly to my next point, which is talking about how in your podcast you cite that members of the British Asian community swim a lot less than their Caucasian counterparts. The figure you cited was 6.9% of British Asian women swam once in the last year, compared to 80.6% of white British women. And this is due to several economic and cultural factors which you listed. And you briefly touched on the cultural factors, which I want to come back to. But before I do, I thought we should start with the economic. So in your podcast, you touched on how access to facilities can influence one's ability to learn. You use your dad as an example, who was born in Pakistan, where there weren't that many swimming pools and he never learned. This has been in my experience too. Before my birth, my dad was actually a ship's captain, and he sailed around the world for 10 years, and he never learned to swim. And you would think that that is something that would be compulsory. And I remember finding it funny growing up that he never learned to swim properly. And I'd speak to him about it, and he would be like, well, where I grew up in Mumbai, there weren't really the facilities to learn. So in the UK, how do you feel like these barriers hinder people from swimming today? Do you think it has improved? And how can we address to bridge the gap?
Well, I think we have to first address what we think the barriers are, right? So if we take the example of generational issues like you've discussed, right? Your dad didn't swim, even though, I mean, his job, crazy that he couldn't swim, amazing at the same time that he didn't swim and he managed to do that job. So I think that's generational. And I think the way in which that hinders us today is that as simple as, if your parents don't see swimming as a priority and something that you need to learn, and you don't learn in school, because in the UK, you do have the opportunity to learn in school, then you're just not going to learn unless you take it upon yourself, right? But it's scary to take something up yourself if you feel like everyone around you can swim, or there's a really basic skill, or you're embarrassed about it. That's exactly how I felt. You hide it maybe for a really long time, and you have a lot of shame associated to it. So, the knock-on effect of that generational thing is that, yes, though this is something that applies to your parents, your grandparents, if you don't inherit it as a result, the knock-on effect is that the onus is on you to learn. And if you don't think it's important, or you're too embarrassed, or you've got too much shame, then you might not, and then you might not pass it on to your own kids. So that's the first thing, one of the perceived barriers, I would say. And I use perceived because I think when we say barriers, it's quite a strong word, and I like to be optimistic in terms of there is ways that we can overcome this. So I like to say perceived because I hope that we can break through them with conversations like this. And I've done that with the podcast. Like, my dad got in the pool and he started to swim, right? It's possible. The second thing I would say is modesty. In Islam, if I think about the specific example that I used in terms of my experience, and feeling like you can swim in something different. And if we don't see examples, whether that's from swimming brands, whether that's from individuals sharing their journeys on social media like me, whether that's, your council pools having pool signage to show what you can and can't wear, and that you can wear something more covered up, how are you possibly going to feel like it's an option for you? And that doesn't have to be because modesty is important in your religion. It could be that you're body conscious. In my podcast, Rebecca Adlington, who is a 4-time Olympic medalist, speaks about how she's felt body conscious because she hasn't been an athlete for years, and she likes to eat chips and drink a glass of wine, I think, is literally the thing that she said in my podcast, right? So even Olympians can feel body conscious, and if we don't see that there are examples of ways to overcome that, then again that will be another barrier. I think that also it's really difficult for schools and the school provision, because I did have swimming lessons in school. I didn't pick it up there because there just simply wasn't the time and the focus, to be able to learn in a 10-week block when you've got a pool full of kids of mixed abilities. And that's not on the teachers. It's one of those where responsibility lies everywhere, really. And so if we don't look at how we're teaching swimming and how we're bringing this life skill, after all, into the lives of our children, then that's also a problem. However, Brown Girl Can't Swim has raised a conversation, and that's a really good start. And I hope that it continues. And I'm hopeful about the fact that we can call this perceived barriers. And in 5, 10, 2 years' time, we're having a different conversation and we've made progress. But the theme that I would say throughout is that there has to be visibility. There has to be conversation, because I didn't have that visibility. I couldn't hear the conversation and it stopped me. And I had the balls, to use a better phrase, to be like, okay, I'm scared and I'm embarrassed, but I think that's important. I'm going to go for it. But others may not feel as brave. They might just stop there, And so I wanted to be the example that I couldn't see. And I know now it inspired other people to learn to swim. And that's amazing. Hundreds of people around the world have now decided to take up swimming because a Brown Girl Can't Swim. That wouldn't have happened had someone not started. So yeah, there's a few barriers, but I hope that, we can find a way to frame the conversation in a way which doesn't feel like it's a barrier and therefore it's a challenge and we can't overcome, but instead to be like, it's a challenge and we can totally overcome.
I think that piece about perceived barriers is so important because it's crucial to address that cultural barriers can be misconstrued. First of all, I didn't consider the whole barriers to do with modesty and insecurity. It's something that I kind of knew deep down, because it's something, although the actual modesty section of it wasn't part of my experience personally, I found the body insecurities a huge hindrance. For me, growing up South Asian, I had extremely dark body hair.
Yeah.
And I used to find it really difficult going swimming and then having my legs showing and I'd get made fun of. And then I'd want to shave them. But then my mum was like, you're too young to shave. And so I remember when she went to India, I actually cut my leg open trying to shave. And it was awful. And I remember the shame that I felt. And I was so scared that I used to get my friends to pretend to be my parents and sign notes being like, I'm too sick to go swimming, to avoid doing it growing up. And that was something that I didn't even consider until I listened to your podcast. It was a memory that I unlocked. But I found it really, really important that you talked about how swimming and Islam and the way of the Prophet Muhammad are not mutually exclusive. You talked about how swimming is actually considered, I don't want to mispronounce the word, so could you please tell the audience? That's the one. But you said that it was desirable and recommended in your podcast, and it unveiled that this activity doesn't actually contradict the ideas of Islam and actually supports it, and that our system should be changed to support communities, because it's not that these activities are inherently bad for them. It's just the way that they are kind of set up excludes them from being able to participate. So can you tell us more about this?
Right. So this was one of the things that I learned in the podcast on the way. It was an investigation as much as it was a challenge of me learning to swim. And when I was interviewing people about why they couldn't swim, a lot of people from the South Asian community, the Muslim community especially, were saying, oh, it's a sunnah to swim, a sunnah to swim. And a sunnah is a good deed, right? So I was like, okay, I need to look into this a little bit more. This is a podcast that's going to be on the BBC. It's got to be factually correct. I reached out to an Islamic scholar and I said, what's this sunnah situation with the swimming? And he was like, Summaya, if you want to be really specific, learning to swim is a mustahab. It's a different type of sunnah. It's still like brownie points, slightly lower level, but still a good thing to do. And he said there are 4 sports that are encouraged in Islam when it comes to survival. One of them is swimming, archery, horse riding, and wrestling. And I was like, wow, my mind is actually blown. Here's a religion that is promoting sports, especially sports that are good for survival and can help other people as well. And swimming is in there because it's a life skill. So I thought, well, this isn't really something that, we talk about much. And if the Muslim community knew that it was a sunnah, a mustahab to swim, I bet you they'd be running to the pools. Do you know what I mean? And it was a really beautiful revelation. But I remember also feeling really, really conflicted at the same time. And I had a conversation with a manager of mine at the BBC when this happened. And I just said, I just need to talk to you about something. Because in the same conversation with the scholar, I said, okay, so how do we balance the fact that this is a faith that's saying you should gain this skill, but it's also a faith that's saying that you should dress modestly and try to be in, especially in terms of swimming, like same-sex spaces as much as possible. So how do we balance those two things? Because in Britain, if I want to go swimming as a woman, it's likely there might be a male lifeguard, there might be a mixed swimming setting, there might be a pool that's got glass all on the side that opens out into a car park that Barry walking down the street can see me, wearing my thing. So that how do we balance all of those things? And, what we have to do, and you're totally right, is take Brown Girl Can't Swim and swimming in the context of where it's happening. I'm learning to swim in Britain, which is going to be a very different experience to learning to swim in Pakistan. In Pakistan, of course, they wouldn't have swimming pools that open out to car parks for everybody to see. Of course, they would have female lifeguards. Of course, there wouldn't be free mixing of men and women together because it's a Muslim country. So I guess the balance is, okay, well, how do we accommodate the community, but also make the community understand that this is also you learning to swim in Britain, and there are practical things that there may not be female lifeguards all the time. The pools are willing to accommodate, but how do both the community, the Muslim community, step forward, and the I say British, but I mean those that aren't Muslim also step forward, and we come to a middle ground and a compromise, and we find a way for us to gain exactly what both parties want, which is to learn to swim. And so that piece in the podcast was really important, because what I was trying to communicate was probably to the more conservative Muslims that want to be in a same-sex setting, that could also be in a changing room, that maybe feel uncomfortable with a male lifeguard. And I asked the scholar, if there is a male lifeguard and you are a woman and you're dressed modestly, can you still swim in front of that person? And he said, yes, you can, because that person is there to save your life. But you might not know that, and you might not still feel comfortable. But that was a really important piece, because it is a faith that encourages the skill, but at the same time, in a faith that encourages you to be modest and try and be in same-sex settings, which can be difficult to achieve in modern day Britain. So there are pools that are accommodating, that do female-only swim classes, but they might only be once a week. They might not be at a time that's right for you, all that type of thing. So it's honestly one of those things with so many different moving parts, but the detail is really important. And that's what I've realized with Brown Girl Can't Swim. And when I've spoken about this, when people ask me, what can we do? I would say, let's not make, really sweeping statements about how we need more people to make it a priority or whatever. What we need is like really specific things. We need to be really specific about what the challenges are. Is it clothing? Is it changing rooms? Is it the architecture of the pool? Is it the lifeguard? And when we're really specific about it, then we can do something about it, And that was an example of me being specific, I guess, in the podcast, because I feel like the solution is in the detail. So yeah, it was quite a revelation. I didn't realize that my own faith promoted swimming. So I'm getting so many brownie points right now.
It's so fascinating. And I feel like this theme of being context specific and addressing challenges in the context that they're created in is so crucial. And I found it kind of linked to the point when you were talking about what to choose to wear, because I thought it was really interesting that you felt conflicted reconciling your identity as a representative of your community and as a representative of Muslim women, but also as an individual who don't mind wearing certain things. And you had that call with your brother, and you said that it was a struggle to kind of strike a balance between wearing something that you felt that your audience could resonate with, but also retaining your unique identity and staying authentic to yourself. What advice would you give to someone who is similar to you, but is trying to kind of navigate their faith and living in a society where there's certain activities and there's certain things that it's not black and white, and you kind of have to be an individual and be true to yourself, but also stay true to your community and your beliefs. I feel like that's quite difficult, and I feel like you struck that balance really, really effectively in your podcast. So could you please share with the audience your thoughts on that?
It was hard. I'm going to be so honest with you. It was very, very difficult, because I remember the conversation I had with my dad and my brother. The conversation we were having was, I was born in Britain. I wear sleeveless clothes all the time. I don't wear them in front of you because I know you don't like it, but I wear it in front of my mates. I've worn a normal swimming costume in front of my mates with my arms and my legs and everything out. It's so haram, It's one of my girlfriends. You might see that as not good, but I've done it, right? Because I was born in Britain. However, I'm also a Muslim. And I know in Islam, there is a massive difference between having a sleeveless swimming costume and having a slight like cap shoulder. Do you know what I mean? Like a slight like t-shirt type of length. It's a whole world of difference. And I know that if there were Muslim girls or women watching me on the BBC, on TV, if they were to see me wearing something sleeveless, they might not even think I was Muslim. They might not even relate to it at all. But if I wear something a bit more covered up, then they might look at it and think, oh, that's really interesting. Like she might be Muslim, you know? So it was so hard because I was trying to find this balance between who I am with my mates and my British side, but who I am also as a Muslim woman and what I was trying to achieve. And that was the big thing was, okay, if we make this like Summaya's story, I can wear whatever I want, fine. But it's only Summaya's story and she's learning to swim and that's nice. Okay. But it became so much more than just me. And the whole purpose was that it was for other people as well. And so I had to take a moment where I thought, I don't want to conform and wear something that isn't reflective of who I am, just to keep my family happy. But at the same time, what I also don't want to do is wear something that I feel comfortable with and that isolates the very community that I'm trying to relate to. And I don't just mean Muslim women, I mean anyone that wants to wear something a little bit more covered up when they're working out, you know? And so I made the decision to go with something a bit more covered up. But it was a whole process of having to have conversations with friends and family. I went to a nail bar with my best mate and I was like, girl, let's get our nails done. Let's talk about this. I feel like I got some whole identity crisis going on. I had a big argument with my dad and my brother, and it was awful and horrible, but we needed to have that conversation. They needed to hear that I was struggling with this. They needed to hear me say, I am British as well. They needed to hear me say, I'm trying to do something good and I need your support, but I'm struggling with who I am. Oh, it was hard. But in answer to your question, how do you navigate it? The way that I did it specifically for the podcast was that I had to take a step back. Literally, I had to just be like, okay, you need to remove yourself from this, Summaya, and you have to serve the story and serve the purpose, and you do what's right for the story, not what's right for like Summaya personally. Obviously, you know, you put your mental health first, but it was like, what is going to be the thing that's going to have the most impact? And it was probably also like deciding to share that part of the story. I could have left it out, but I know that people need to hear it, especially people that will have this conflict, whether that's because of what you wear in a swimming pool or your boyfriend or the clothes you wear or the other secrets and double lives and standards that you're trying to balance. It's difficult. How did I navigate it? With the podcast, alhamdulillah, I managed to find a way, right? And it was through difficult conversations. It was through support. It was through speaking to my producers at the BBC. Definitely conversation helped me a lot. I had to step away from the story a little bit for my own mental health. I was literally finding out who I was. Like Brown Girl Can't Swim became existential. But I think that it's whether it's learning to swim or something else, there will be moments in your life where you assess who you are and you assess what's important to you. And it's scary and it can be difficult. The thing that I would say is you've got to protect your mental health. That's the biggest thing, is you've got to protect your mental health. And if it gets to a point where you feel like you're suppressing who you are, and you're not happy, and you know that's making you poorly mentally, and I've been there as well, then you've got to try and take action. And that could be therapy, or it could be having very difficult conversations with the people closest to you, like I had to do. And I would encourage that, obviously only within the capacity where you feel like you're going to be safe and stuff. Everybody's situation is very, very different, you know. But conversations with the people closest to me, that were hard and that I had to try and take on the journey with me and explain this is who I am, was probably the thing that's helped me most. But I still struggle with it. Like, you know, I'll still go to my dad's house and I might be wearing something sleeveless on the way there, and I'll put a jacket on or a cardigan on, just because I know he'd be happier that way, you know. And it's just sort of like pick your battles a little bit. And I think that's the other thing that I would say is, you know, if it's a really big thing like a relationship and somebody that you want to marry, you know, and you want to bring them home and you're scared of like judgment from your family and stuff like that, that's a big conversation that you probably need to have. It probably won't be as bad as you think, or it might be really, really difficult, but regardless, like, protect your mental health, have a good community of people around you that can support you, and really prioritize like what keeps your head healthy and happy. And that's what I did. My friends, my family, even though they were difficult to have conversations with, we became a lot closer actually because of Brown Girl Can't Swim. And you hear the journey of my family in the podcast. If you think about that episode where you're talking about where we have that conflict to the final episode of the challenge, you see that journey. And I believe that it is possible for other people as well. That's what I would say.
That's so beautiful. And I thought the journey of your family kind of with you, not just your dad learning to swim towards the end, but also them kind of becoming more open, and also like the not just the physical journey, but like the kind of mental, spiritual, community journey, the family journey was really powerful. And you mentioned briefly that your friends and your family were your support system, but you also touched on in your podcast mental health issues. And I remember when you were speaking to Becky, she said that swimming was the thing that she leant on when things got hard for her. Aside from your friends and family, what is one thing that you lean on when, or more than one thing that you lean on when things get hard for you? How do you take care of yourself? Because you just emphasized that it's very important to take care of yourself. What advice would you have for young women or men or anyone listening to do that for themselves?
My answer is going to blow your mind. The thing, weirdly, that I now lean on is swimming. That's mad, isn't it? It used to actually scare me and I had so much anxiety around it and stuff. And now, I don't know, like, honestly, Micah, I can't put into words why it helps me so much with my mental health. It might be because of the journey. It might be because it was this thing that I couldn't do and now I can. But if I feel wobbly and, I can't, pick up the phone and speak to my mates about it or whatever, I have a gym membership, which means I can go to the pool at any time. And it's slightly more expensive, but it's worth it because it means that I can literally go over the road and I can go for a swim. And I think it's because I can't be on my phone. I have to focus on my breathing. And I think it's probably something to do with the fact that they say that physical activity is good for your mental health, right? And I think that I have sometimes struggled to find the physical activity that I actually enjoy doing. I find the gym so boring. Honestly, I couldn't think of anything worse. I find it so boring. I used to run when I lived abroad in a really beautiful place in Germany. And I used to live next to a lake on the Swiss-German border. So I wouldn't mind running there because I literally had lakes and mountains. I run around Nottingham. It's depressing because it's concrete, so it's not quite the same sort of vibe. But I've always weirdly had an affinity with water. I've always loved being by the sea. I've always loved being by a lake or something like that. It's just so good for my mental health. But at the same time, it would come with a bit of fear because I was like, don't get too close. Now I can get close, not too close, obviously still be safe. But it would be swimming. It would be swimming. And I think to anybody listening, in terms of your mental health, I would encourage going for a run, going for a walk. I know people talk about it loads, like, be active. And when you're sad and depressed or anxious, the last thing you might want to do is get on your trainers and go for a run. I get it. I have been there. But you've got to dig deep and you've got to do it, even if it's just for 5 minutes, is what I would say. Physical activity, totally. The other thing that I would say, actually, because obviously I couldn't always swim. So before I could swim, writing. You're always going to be able to find a pen and paper somewhere. But writing has helped me a lot. And I don't journal now as much as I should because at the minute my mental health is quite good. It often tends to be like, if you look at my journals, if you've got lots and lots of daily entries, it's probably because my mental health is a little bit like, whoa. But I haven't picked up a journal in a little bit, and I totally should, because you should do it when it's, when you're feeling strong or when you're also not feeling strong. But writing helps me a lot, and there's no technique to it. Sometimes it's literally just verbal diarrhea of what's going on in your brain. But I came across a journal actually at Waterstones. It's called Write It Down, Let It Go, and I discovered it when I was in my final year of uni. And my mental health was fine, but I knew that I was going to be entering a period of stress because of my dissertation. And I was thinking, okay, just like with Brown Girl Can't Swim, I was thinking, okay, I know this thing is going to be stressful that I'm about to enter. So what are the things that I can put in place now that can help me with that? And I just went to Waterstones. I found this journal. It was written by a psychologist, and there's loads of tips and stuff in there. But the one thing that I took out of it that was actually really practical, and it's the way that I write now, is say if there's 3 things I'm stressed about, I write on the right side of the page the thing that's stressing me out. And before I move on to the next thing that's stressing me out, I write on the left side of the page the actions that I'm going to take to address it. So by the time you finish journaling, you've had a bit of a sort of offload in terms of how you're feeling on the right side of the page. And then on the left side of the page, you've got practical actions of things you can do to make yourself feel better. And that's definitely something that's helped me a lot, I would say, with mental health. And I would highly recommend it.
That is so helpful, and I'm definitely going to do that tonight. And I encourage everyone that listens to this to give that exercise a go because it sounds super useful. I think it's really cool that you also talk about you address the importance of recognizing and writing down and reflecting when things are going well. So in that spirit, because we've been talking about shame and guilt and overcoming obstacles for a while, what is something that you're super proud of recently? Like what is a win? What is Summaya's daily win today?
My daily win today?
Yes.
What's my daily win? Okay, I'll just say the first thing that came to my head, actually. It might not be the best thing for me to say, but the first thing that came to my head. I did an interview with a guy on my radio show today who reached out to me on Instagram. He was called Ram. And he sent me a message. I have the message actually. Let me read the message word for word before I get it wrong and summarize it and then make it sound really bad in comparison to what it actually was. So he sent me a message a few days ago. Hold the line. She's getting her DMs open for you guys. Look at this. Look at this. It's straight in Summaya's DMs. Okay, so he said this. Good morning, my name is Ram. I'm 26 and I'm a dwarf from Leicester. I've made a short film, which I've been working on for 3 years, and it's based on my life experience, and it's finally completed, and it's going to be released on Sunday, the 11th of June. I've also created a trailer. I hope you get a chance to look at it. Thank you. And then he attached the trailer. And I was thinking, okay, like I get a lot of random messages from people, but here's somebody that has decided to be brave enough to reach out to a complete stranger that he doesn't know and share his work. And that's really brave. He's not a filmmaker. He's literally someone with an experience that's very different to perhaps a lot of us. And I replied to him and I said, I'm going to get my producer to call you. And he was really, really excited. And then my producer called him yesterday and then he came on my show today. So at 10:15 this morning, he was on the radio with me, with his dad. His proud dad had come in and was filming him. And it absolutely made his life. Not because he was talking to me, but because he had an opportunity to share his story. And the whole reason why he created his film was because he wanted to sort of break misconceptions about what it's like to be a smaller person and to have restricted growth. He's 26 and he was brilliant. He was so good. And yet he was talking about something that, you know, I had never in a million years ever considered what is life like for someone with restricted height. You know, I joke about the fact that I'm 5 foot all the time. My Instagram bio is pint-sized Pakistani, literally. But this is completely different. And I think as a bloke as well, and for him to have the bravery to be like, yeah, I go to supermarkets, people look at me all the time because I am a dwarf. And you watch films and I'm trying to, you know, sort of break down barriers in terms of like the fact that we're not just all, you know, used for comedic value. You know, when you think about how individuals with restricted height, how we see them on the telly and stuff, like often it can be comical. And that's okay for people that want to be like that, but he doesn't want to be like that. And so the thing that I'm proud of today is the fact that I somehow managed to use my job to facilitate and give a platform to somebody that wanted to share his story, that had a voice and a perspective that we do not hear enough, probably. And he enjoyed it and had a good time. And it absolutely just like made his week. And his dad was a babe as well. That's my win.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I literally can't stop smiling. That's so beautiful. I was actually earlier going to ask you about how do you think social media has like made the problem about body insecurities worse and around going to the pool because you see all of these airbrushed amazing pictures of people with abs and like no stretch marks but that's so fascinating to me that social media was actually used as a vehicle for empowerment for someone to show that they're different, they don't conform to beauty ideals, and yet they're powerful and they're amazing and they're brilliant. Do you think that social media at this
point is more of a detriment or more of a benefit to the society we live in and insecurity? And do you think it hinders people from their personal mission and their happiness, or do you think it supports it?
I think it depends how you use it. So obviously, you can't control, and I've had these challenges with social media. I went through a whole period of social media anxiety. Honestly, like, was just not. I didn't get Instagram until I joined the BBC in 2018 because I didn't need Instagram. Do you know what I mean? I had Facebook. I don't even use Facebook now, but like, I don't have Snapchat. Downloaded it once in my life and then just got rid of it. So I'm not the sort of person that cares about or is naturally drawn to sharing my life with the world, or even going on and looking at other people's lives. It's just I don't really care. You know what I mean? So when I became a presenter for the BBC, and actually, was trying to find stories and find out about other people's lives so that I could get them as guests on my show, I downloaded Instagram. That's why I did it. And then because of the nature in which I joined the BBC, where it was a competition, I won this competition and I had no radio experience before, I was then sharing that with people because people wanted to know, like, oh my God, like, what is she going to do next? Like, this is crazy. So I think, in answer to your question, it really depends how you use it. There's two things here. One of the things I struggled with social media was, and I still struggle with this, is I don't want to come across arrogant or narcissistic. Let's be honest, it's just a platform for like you doing stuff with your life, right? And we only often share the good stuff. So it can just look like a massive bragging platform. I really can't bother with that. And I remember, like, especially before Brown Girl Can't Swim, I used to get really worried about sharing my success on social media and how other people might feel as a result of that. Because I know I'd been on social media and I felt a bit crappy about my life because somebody else looked like they were doing amazing. So there was that conflict for me where I was like, I don't want to share what I'm doing and make other people feel crap, but it might not make them feel crap. And I have absolutely no control in terms of how they're going to internalize that. And I had to let go of that. And the other thing was, I don't want to come across as arrogant. I really, really don't want to do that. And I think now Brown Girl Can't Swim has helped me a lot, actually, because social media was one of the best things with the campaign. One, because it helped me more with my relationship with it, in that I could see it for something that could do good, and it did good. And when I shared that I couldn't swim and that I was doing this campaign with the BBC, oh my gosh, it just blew up. It was absolutely crackers. And because it was seen on social media and was doing so well, then that's also why the BBC were like more interested, because they could see there was an audience there. And then I was on 5 Live and Radio 2, and it snowballed and escalated. And actually, it was because, and BBC Breakfast asked me this, they were like, oh, you've had lots of people get in touch on social media. And I was like, yeah. So because it showed that it wasn't just a me problem, this was something that was being spoken about across the world, essentially, as people were reaching out to me. So I think it depends how you use it. Yes, it can be detrimental if you're putting stuff out there that isn't good for the world. Yes, it can be toxic. It can also be detrimental for people that maybe aren't feeling great themselves and are looking at other people and comparing, right? But you can't control how somebody else is going to internalize your content. And that's really on that person to kind of manage their relationship with it and do what's right for their mental health. And I say that as that person as well, where I've had to, mute people or unfollow accounts or stay off it because I know it's not good for my headspace. But I also think that it can be used for good, because it can be used as a platform for visibility or showing things that we don't see or starting conversations that we don't see, and that can be really valuable. And that's definitely how I used it with Brown Girl Can't Swim. Having said that, it was also incredibly overwhelming, because I didn't expect to get the amount of messages and the response that I did when I shared the campaign. And I remember going to work and feeling, I actually had a bit of a cry. I was so stressed and overwhelmed, because I think I felt like I had to help every single person that was commenting on my post how to swim. And I think that I'd probably given an impression that the BBC was going to give everybody swimming lessons, and then I got really stressed out. But yeah, like, I felt, and my producer had to say to me, like, Summaya, you can't help everybody learn to swim. You physically can't do that. And I was like, I don't even know where to redirect them. I don't know how to help these people. How do I help this person in like Dubai? How do I help this person in Leicester? Like, it just, you know, and even now I get messages from people who are learning to swim, or their parents are learning to swim, and they're sending me updates, and that's fun, and I love that, and that's brilliant and amazing, and I'm so glad that that's continuing. But when it was all at once, it was a lot for one human being to take. However, would I go back and do it all again? Absolutely, because it meant that all of those people could see that they weren't alone, and that they weren't the only person on the planet that couldn't swim, and that they didn't need to feel embarrassed, and that there was something that could be done about it, and that they were going to follow this girl and see if she could do this challenge, and then she did it. And I hope that it thereby inspired and motivated them. So I think it can be a really, really great positive thing. But even now, like, you know, it's not really something I enjoy doing. If you ever see me post on social media, like, I either wanted to do that post or I felt like I had to do that post. So it's still something that I'm contending with myself.
And how have you got better at making it affect you less? Because I used to have the same issue, obviously not on the same scale, but the way I kind of got over it was I realized that I'm sharing my life, I'm not exhibiting it. And I turned off my comments. I'm still a public profile, but it made me view it more. And I also turned off the like count, and I recognize as a public figure that's not something that you might be able to do, because there's certain things to do with marketing and everything. But what is your coping mechanisms? Because that's how I dealt with it, and that's how it made me feel like it was more of an online scrapbook than a kind of CV, or like this is my website, take this, have this, see this. What do you do to stay sane online?
I think that when it comes to posting, I really had to figure out when I would feel anxious, and when I would get like stressed out. And I realized I felt anxious when I was being inauthentic. So when I was posting, you know, I said to you at the beginning of this conversation, I literally don't care about posting my life and being like, oh, look at me at the pub with my friends having a drink or whatever, an orange juice. I don't care about sharing that type of thing. So whenever I felt like I was doing something like that, I mean, just to put out there, I've never ever posted anything like that. But what I'm saying is, whenever I felt like I was posting because I felt like I had to, that's when I would get anxious about it, because I felt inauthentic. I felt like this is literally so, I don't know, like trivial and meaningless and has absolutely no substance or purpose at all whatsoever. However, whenever I've posted and it's come from a place of authenticity, and I've wanted to share it, then I don't get stressed in the same way. And that's what helped me. Everybody's different. I think it also depends on why you're doing it, right? So for me, like, Over Brown Girl Can't Swim, I think I got better with time because I was doing it more consistently. But every post that I did had a meaning, it had a purpose. So it didn't matter about the like count. I didn't care so much about it. But if it wasn't coming from a place of authenticity and I was doing it because I felt like I had to do it, then I was looking at the like count or the impressions or whatever, you know, then I would care more about that type of thing. If I posted something that I really, really cared about and it got like 25 likes, that might be a bit like, okay, less than normal, but whatever, man, I did it because I cared about it. It's important to put it in the world. But if I did the same thing and it was just like, so didn't matter to me, then I'd probably be a bit more like, oh my God, like, got to take it down or something, you know? So I think it depends on like the place it's coming from. When it felt authentic, I was sound. And when it didn't feel authentic, I didn't feel sound. So I stick on staying authentic. I think the other thing was, and I'm getting a bit better at it now, like I've realized that I do so much stuff in my life that people don't see. And I've never really been that bothered in sharing it. But I've realized that actually people find it interesting, or they find it inspiring, or they're like, you know, they want to know, like, what's it like in, you know, a day in the life of a radio presenter. My office is a radio studio, you know, and that's not necessarily normal. And I guess now I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like if I can give a bit of an insight and do something a little bit interesting, and other people are going to be like, oh, cool. And it might inspire them, or they just find it fun. But I feel cool doing it, then I'll do it. So now, like, okay, I was at the Man Like Mo Bean premiere with Guz Khan, and it's just started today on BBC Three. I don't really care about celebrities, but I had a great time going there and chatting to the guys, and I did a little reel, and I felt fine because, yeah, it wasn't like empowering, inspiring content, but it was something that I was cool sharing with the world, and it's good for me to showcase my work. And I think that's the other thing with social media, and I think especially in creative industries, is that whether you like it or not, and this is the real dilemma that I've had to deal with and come to terms with, whether I like it or not as a presenter, it's important that I have a profile on social media. it's just the reality, you know, especially if you're building yourself up and you're starting from the bottom. It's important. Like, it's just, I mean, it's not like you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have it, but what's the first thing that you probably did when you came across me? You Googled my name. And the research that you've done, and the fact you know that I've done a TED or that I've done interviews on other podcasts, is because you've Googled me and all that stuff's come up. It's kind of your CV, right? And so if you want to show the world what you can do, and you want to, you know, be putting yourself in like the best position to get opportunities that you want. So you want to showcase, I don't know, I want to do television. If I don't show that I can do television, people might not associate me with television. As soon as I start showing I can do TV, people associate with, oh, she can do TV, and then opportunities might come that way. So it's that delicate balance between, yes, being authentic, but also I know that I've kind of got to do it because of the industry that I'm in. I'm not willing to compromise my mental health as a result of that. So I'll always put that first. But now I'm like, right, you've got loads of skills and you do loads of interesting stuff all the time and nobody sees it. And I don't care that nobody sees it. But now I'm like, people should probably see it because it helps me with my career, you know? So I've kind of become a little bit more no nonsense about it, and had to just be like, over time, it's taken time for me to just suck it up and be like, hun, if you want to stay in this industry, this is what you got to do, you know, and try to be a bit more business minded about it, and kind of detach myself as much as I can from my profile being like me and all my personal life, and just like Summaya as a broadcaster, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it takes time. Takes time.
Thank you for being so candid. I think it's really cool that you're learning to strike that balance as something that people struggle with for a long time. You mentioned, and very, very exciting, but you're now a TEDx speaker, and your talk hasn't come out, but by the time this podcast is released, it will be out. So could you please walk us through the process of preparing and delivering this talk, and what were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Okay, so TED approached me. I got approached to do a TEDx a few years ago when I joined BBC Radio Leicester and I was doing their breakfast show. I was 24, 25, and I just joined the BBC. I've been there for about less than a year, and I thought, okay, this is like, I understand why you've got in touch with me. I'm a breakfast show presenter. I've been in the BBC for 5 minutes and I've done really well to get that promotion. But I didn't really feel like I had anything to tell the world that was like worthy enough for a TEDx. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a platform with a reputation. Do you know what I mean? So you want to make sure that like you are nailing that, and that people are walking away from that being like, wow, my mind is blown. I grew up watching TED Talks, you know, like, it's crazy. And it's just so, I don't know, it's so unbelievably prestigious. And it's never something that was on my bucket list of things to do, because I never felt like, oh, I could be a TEDx or a TED speaker. You know, it's just random girl that, you know, grew up in Nottingham. So when they approached me a few years ago, I actually rejected it and said, I'm really flattered, but I have nothing of value right now that I feel is worthy in a field platform. So I'm going to say no. And then they approached me because they were coming to Nottingham for the first time. And I was like, okay, this is exciting. It's coming to my hometown. And they approached me and said that they wanted to do an event that had the theme of how we can enrich humanity. And under that, the theme that they wanted me to focus on was courage. And I was like, all right, I think I can talk about that, because I've had to do loads of really scary things recently. So sure. So the first thing was, and that helped me with my preparation, was when they approached me, and when they approached me the second time, I felt like I had something to say. Rather than doing a TED for the sake of it and then getting really stressed out that I knew that I was just spieling words and I had absolutely nothing to give to the world. And that helped with the preparation. But the prep process was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because the story that I decided to tell was my own. So when you do a TED or a TEDx or whatever, you know, you can either do it from the perspective of being an expert on something, like, oh, I'm an expert in science and this new stem cell research, or you can tell it from the perspective of a story that you have that's your own, that's personal. And the latter was what I decided to do. And therefore it felt very scary. And I struggled with trying to, because with TED, the way that they say it is like, the way they frame it is like, you want to give people a different perspective on something or share an idea. The tagline is ideas worth sharing. So I was like, God, what's the idea that I've got that's worth sharing? And I asked myself the question, what would be the one message that you would want to give to a younger version of yourself? And when I asked myself that question, I knew exactly what I wanted my TED Talk to be about. And I thought about that person, and I thought about younger Summayas, younger brown girls, the version of me that didn't see people like me, the version of me that felt like it was shameful that I was, a good performer. It was shameful that, I loved to, read loads and wanted to be a journalist. And so I dedicated my TED Talk to this concept that we all have a gift to give to the world. And your gift might be a trait. Maybe you're a really good listener. Maybe you're an empath. It could be a talent. Maybe you're a brilliant performer. Maybe you're a fantastic writer. Maybe you're a musician. It could even be your story, how you got to where you are today. And for some, the journey to embracing that gift for what it actually is, something of value, can be really easy and fine because they see it as valuable, or it can be the opposite. It can be really, really difficult. And my whole TED Talk was about the fact that we all have a gift and why you should embrace it and see it as something that is valuable, not only for yourself, but because of the impact that it can have on humanity as a whole, and the fact that it can actually enrich humanity when you do embrace that gift, whatever it is. But it was essentially me standing on a stage with my dad in the audience saying, I am a performer. That's what I'm good at. And you know what? It's great. And this is all the amazing stuff that I've managed to do as a result. And so you guys should all also embrace the thing that you're good at too, because it won't only be good for yourself, but also may have unexpected consequences that have positive impacts on other people too. And he was so proud of me. He was so, so proud of me, because he'd been on a journey as well, So yeah, the prep was hard. The challenge was the fact that I was telling a very personal story, but I overcame it by actually writing the TED with my dad, writing it with my closest best friends in all the world, and getting really honest feedback as to whether they thought it was great or totally crap. I did almost cry in the TED, as you'll see when you watch it. There's one particular line, even when I practiced it, every time I practiced it, I was like, oh my God, I would always choke up. I would always cry. You have to watch the TED Talk to see what the line is. But I managed to pull myself together. And yeah, for a first TEDx, I think it's all right. I hope you enjoy it. Let's see.
I'm beyond excited to listen to it. What impact do you hope your talk will have on young women, on the audience and beyond? How do you envision this talk contributing to positive change?
Well, it's already had a bit of an impact, which is good, because there were some students in the audience that messaged me on Instagram afterwards saying, like, thank you so much. One of them said it made her reassess her whole life. And I was like, honey, if you ever want to talk about stuff, like, it sounds like it turned you into a bit of an existential spiral, and that's not what I wanted to happen. But she was like, no, in a good way, in a good way. How do I think it will sort of create positive change after all? Well, I think, the fact that you've got a strong brown woman standing on a stage and being like, this is what I do, and it's very different to what you might expect. And we are seeing more of it now. But it's hard for me to have got to this point. However, I'm here, and I want to show that, it can be difficult. These are some of my challenges, but you can overcome it, and you can have a really positive, incredible impact on society that's far beyond anything that you could have possibly ever comprehended. I hope will inspire people, whatever their background is, whatever their age, their race, their gender, their social class, whatever, to feel like that they can do the thing that they feel in their heart and soul they have been put on this earth to do. Because I feel like we all have something that we're really good at, and your gift doesn't have to be something that you pursue as a career. It can just be something that you enjoy doing, that you love, and it's like your release. And you don't have to carve a whole career out of it like I've done, but just do it for your own mental health. But for some reason, we don't necessarily prioritize that thing that we enjoy, because we get busy and life gets in the way, and we've got kids or essays and stuff to do. And so I hope the impact that it has is that it makes people just take a moment to stop and to think about what their gift is. And my brother did this. He listened to my TED Talk. I sent him like the link that's not out into the world yet. And he called me straight back after he listened to it, and he was like, and he's so savage, by the way, he's a big brother, so you know, big brothers have to be savage with you, and you know, like if you've done good or bad based on what your big brother says to you. And he was like, Summaya, that was, and then he swore, amazing. He was like, it was so good. And then he turned around and said, what do you think my gift is? And I was like, honey, I think we both know what your gift is, but if you want me to tell you as your little sister, it's this. And we had this whole conversation about what he was good at and what he enjoyed and what resonated with him and his most authentic, happiest self, and the fact that he needed to do that thing more. He's a musician, how he needed to embrace the music stuff more. And I think if my TED can make people just take a moment to stop and consider what brings them joy, and then they decide to do that thing a little bit more, that'd be amazing. Anything beyond that is a plus. But that at a minimum would be incredible.
I feel so moved listening to this. And again, after I do the journal exercise that you mentioned earlier, I'm going to think about what my gifts are to give to the world and how I can contribute to my life and to the lives of the people around me. I just have a couple final questions for you. So you just spoke about how being a performer is who you are and it's influenced your journey and your career and your circumstance. And although you learned to swim a bit later than some people typically do, in 2010, you assisted in the creation of the Pakistan Flood Appeal Charity, which raised over 33,000 to aid in the July 2010 floods in Pakistan. This highlights that the issue of swimming and survival and helping people in your community has been a recurring theme in your life for some time. How do you feel like this volunteering endeavor and your life has kind of led up to this point, and how helping your community and helping others, as well as being a performer, has brought you to who you are today and where you are today?
I think so the volunteering work was really driven by my dad as well. As a family, when the floods happened in Pakistan and when they even happened recently, it's so weird how the world works. But while I was recording Brango Concert and learning to swim, there were the recent floods in Pakistan. And those floods also occurred, like, you know, many years ago as well. And I think that motivation to want to help others came from growing up with a father that was born in Pakistan, came to this country, had to retrain and do his exams in order to be a medic here, but found it very, very hard. He failed a lot of his exams and then had to keep redoing them. We didn't have a lot of money. We were living on a council estate that was racist. And he was working in a takeaway whilst also studying and grafting. And yet, despite that, you know, a whole experience of like doing his exams and training to be a doctor and all the rest of it, he still had the time and made the time for those in need. And I remember when those floods happened in Pakistan, one of the first things that my dad initiated was for our primary school, because we were only at primary school at the time, to get parents to give blankets. And the primary school used the school hall and collected loads of blankets. Next thing I know, my dad's like speaking to the supermarkets and speaking to the airport chaplaincy and getting packages flown over to Pakistan. And he's, you know, that whole endeavor managed to raise like more than 10 tons of aid, you know. So I think in terms of my life, being exposed to a role model like my dad from a young age has probably had an influence on me in terms of me contributing to the world. I've always also had an interest in aid work, and it's something that I would love to do, really, really love to do at some point. And I would like it to be maybe, you know, maybe I could link the journalism stuff and the aid work and stuff. I'd have to see, but I think it probably comes from that, you know. And I think, I suppose from being a performer, I've always wanted to help people, as soppy as that sounds. I just have, like, and let's be honest, when you help someone, you feel good about yourself as well. So it's not because I'm being a selfless human being. Do you know what I mean? When you help someone else and they're like, oh, thank you so much, like, you love it for yourself as well. And I'm not doing it because I want other people to like me. I'm doing it because it's good. It feels good to give. It's one of the five pillars of well-being, I think, is to give, right? So I think for me, it's okay, you want to help people, but how can you do that based on what you're good at? And that's what I really struggled with in terms of my gift situation, because I felt like the thing I was good at was performing or being a journalist. And I didn't feel like that was something that was valuable that could help people, because I wasn't saving lives. You know, my dad is a doctor, he literally saves people's lives. And those feelings of inadequacy were very difficult for me to reconcile, even when I joined the BBC, because I felt like I really want to help people, I really want to make a difference, but how can I do that if I'm being an actor and going on screen or standing on a stage and pretending to be somebody else? Who on earth is that helping? And I remember my best friend said to me at the time, Summaya, what about Angelina Jolie? And I was like, what about her? And she was like, well, she does stuff with the UN. Do you know what I mean? Like, she does so much charity work because of the fact that she has that profile and she's like this massive actress. She actually uses that profile in such a positive way to do loads of charity work. And she used the example of Emma Watson, like Hermione Granger, you know, who also does a similar sort of thing. And so I guess what I started to see was that maybe there was a way for me to reconcile the thing that I'm good at, performing, with also being able to help people and make a difference, you know. And in terms, it links very well to your social media stuff. I really don't care about having a profile, but what I realize is if I throw myself into social media and I share my work and I get a profile, and that means my work reaches more people and I can make a bigger difference, then fine, I will do it, you know. But I think that my upbringing of, like I said, having someone like my dad that pushed the importance of thinking of other people when he and we as a family had very little. I feel now a responsibility, especially in my job. It's probably the thing that I care about the most, is I have a responsibility, like I did today, to use my platform to help other people. Not everybody has a radio show where they broadcast to thousands of people. Not everybody has the opportunity to, you know, do things on the BBC on television. Not everybody has the opportunity to write an article for BBC News Online. So that's a privileged position to be in, and I should use it to help people, because it feels like it's not what I want to do, it's what I feel like I should do, you know. So yeah, has that answered your question?
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Again, so many powerful insights, and I think that links again perfectly to my final question for you. This has been an amazing year for you, and we're only in June, we're halfway through. What's next?
Oh my God, I hate that question. I'm joking. I don't hate that question. Loads of people ask me that question. They asked me that question after the Brown Girl Can't Swim, and they're like, oh, so you've done the swim. What are you going to do now? I was like, I'm going to go to sleep because I'm absolutely exhausted. What's next? I had an idea today, and it's about something that I'd already thought about before. And so after the campaign, there were lots of opportunities that came about, right? I got offered like brand deals and stuff. Do you want to be like the face of this? I was like, no, not particularly. Or even if I wanted to, I can't, because I work for the BBC, you know, and I'm permanent staff. I'm not a freelancer. So there was some brand deals. Then there was, do we want to do another swimming challenge? And then I was like, oh, I feel like I've got unfinished business because I learned to swim, but actually I wanted loads of other people to learn to swim. And then there was a TED talk. And I'll be honest, I didn't really have the time, actually, or that even the mental energy or headspace to think about what I wanted to do next, because I was just exhausted, you know. And it was fantastic and brilliant, but I was just like, I don't want to just throw myself into something. I think I just need a little bit of time to step away and just assess what's important to me. So I did exactly that. I took a little bit of time. I did a play and I loved it. I realized that I really wanted to do more acting, because I did a play and I hadn't been on a stage for a really long time, about a decade, and I went to this random audition. I got the lead part, and I thought, I'm going to do it, and I might be really bad, and I did it, and I got amazing reviews, and I thought, you are not that bad, Summaya. I think you should do this, honey, you know. So what's next? I think I'm still in the process of taking a bit of time to not just dive, excuse the pun, into the next thing that comes my way. What I would caveat is that it's really good to say yes to everything. 100% absolutely do that, especially earlier on in your career. But there also perhaps comes a point where you need to focus, and be like, okay, like you've said yes to all this stuff, amazing, you've got all these contacts, all these different experiences and stuff, but now let's sort of get a bit streamlined with it and focus on the thing that you want, and, you know, move towards that now. And so in terms of me and my focus, I want to do more telly. Look at this beautiful face, you're depriving it. I'm joking. So I would like to do more telly stuff. I would really like to do more acting, because it makes me so happy. It's my release. I love it. to bits. So I'd really love to do that. But I'm not finished with the swimming stuff yet. There's still work to be done in that space, and I feel a responsibility to do that also because of the insight and the research and everything that I've done now, you know, and I'm still doing that. I get local councils, I get, you know, organizations, I get people on an individual level still reaching out to me, and that just goes to show that there is still a need, do you know what I mean, to have somebody that has the experience that I do. So yeah, they're the three things. Is I'm sticking in swimming. There's still work to be done there, and I'm not going to give that up because that's an important mission for me. I feel like that's my kind of gift to give to the world in terms of the work that I do. I'm going to do some more acting. I'm going to try and do a little bit more telly. But I'm also just going to enjoy the fact that I can now hang out and see my mates a little bit more, because I had absolutely no social life over the last year. I literally didn't even celebrate my birthday. And I've got to see my mates. So yeah, that's me for now, I would say, while still doing a radio show nearly every single day of the week.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing all of these incredible insights today in our conversation. Thank you for all of the amazing work that you've done this year as well. It's been such an inspiration to me, and I'm sure I'm going to link all of the resources in the show notes, and I'm sure the audience who haven't already listened to Brown Girl Can't Swim will benefit like the same way that I did. And please take a well-deserved rest, because like I don't even know like how to describe it, but you are truly an empowering woman and a girl boss. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything.
Thank you absolute babe. You're a girl boss too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empower Sounds podcast. Stay tuned every Monday for your weekly dose of inspiration and entertainment.